Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
So we would expect them to stay at home until they are well.
BC's plan to deal with a widespread coronavirus outbreak. Also,
so it's really high time that we make some changes.
Why Surrey is moving quickly to ban plastic bags. And
for the video's sake.
A BC fisherman charged after throwing an explosive into a crowd of sea lions.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
good evening. It may well be a matter of when, not if, in dealing with a widespread outbreak of coronavirus here in BC.
And while health officials insist people shouldn't worry about catching it, tonight they are talking about a pandemic response plan. As
Leanne Young reports, part of that plan is to ask you to stay home if you catch COVID-19, just like if you had the flu.
The scenes out of Wuhan are near apocalyptic. Empty streets, checkpoints everywhere, and whether you're sick or not, you're forced to stay home. But even if the outbreak gets worse here, public health officials say you won't see the same.
So could we potentially see like mass self-isolation being recommended?
No, that is not an intervention that we do at a population level.
Experts around the world are warning COVID-19 could fast become a pandemic, and so far the focus has been on containment.
Right now, every single person that's been diagnosed in British Columbia and Ontario, we can pinpoint where they were most likely infected. If that changes, and in many outbreaks it does change, we see that all the time. And when that changes, then your interventions become different.
If the infection spreads to the point they can't track the origin, BC's approach will shift to mitigation.
So when you have community transmission of a respiratory pathogen, counterintuitively, your interventions actually become different and in some ways less restrictive.
Instead, Dr. Gustafson says they'll likely treat it closer to the flu. If you're sick, stay home. Testing will only be for the most severe cases, and they won't be tracking every person you've come into contact with.
I think the biggest consequence that Canadians will see is a voluntary request to consider maybe doing things more virtually. So, for example, setting up arrangements for virtual work, or instead of doing a conference in person, doing it electronically. But that would be one of the bolder moves if this gets very bad.
While your instinct might be to rush to the grocery store and stock up on essentials and non-perishable goods, it's smart to be prepared, but experts say you don't need much more than beyond your usual 72-hour emergency preparedness kit like you would for any natural disaster.
Planning for a pandemic is underway, and some say much needed for our overtaxed healthcare system.
We are in a nursing crisis. There are not enough nurses currently to do the work that we need. Nurses are resilient and doing their very best, but it is a situation that would be complicated by a large outbreak and certainly with requirements to stay away from work.
Hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but if it does, be prepared. A possible pandemic should not come with panic. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
As our province prepares for the possibility of its own outbreak, there are also people here worried about loved ones in countries already dealing with the rapid spread, like in Iran, where fears of the situation is far worse than officials are admitting. The country is reporting 19 deaths from coronavirus, the highest number outside China, but just 139 cases. That doesn't line up with the virus's fatality rate of around 2%. Our Tina Lovegreen spoke to people concerned for family members stuck in Iran.
When I see the picture, I just remember that memorable day.
Neda Salimian reflects on a happier moment when her whole family was together.
It's too hard for me to continue.
Her husband, who's a permanent resident, is stuck in Iran with no way to get back to Canada. She and their teenage son are frightened.
He is missing his dad a lot. He feels alone.
As the coronavirus spreads, neighboring countries have shut down their borders, and flights out of Iran are almost impossible to come by.
All of international airlines are stopped.
It was like 2 months in advance.
It's a situation many Canadian Iranians are finding themselves in. Golsa Sadi's father was supposed to visit for the upcoming Persian New Year, but his Turkish Airlines flight is also canceled.
It's so hard. Every day I wake up and just the first thing that I do is checking the news.
More people have died from the coronavirus in Iran than any other country outside of China. There are doubts the country is equipped to contain the virus and fears it's vastly underreporting the number of cases. Travel agencies are scrambling to help passengers. The only real option is Qatar Airways.
Yesterday we found just one seat for 4,200.
How much is it usually?
2,000 or less.
Salimian and others are asking the government to help.
They sent an airplane to take them to Canada.
But the government says it won't do that, leaving many loved ones separated for the time being. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, North Vancouver.
And stick around, we'll have much more coverage on coronavirus later in this newscast. The family of a missing New Westminster mother is pleading for help in finding Nirla Sharma. Her disappearance is considered high risk, and the city's major crimes unit is now looking into the case.
Our Dan Bird is live with more on the family. And Dan, what are they saying tonight?
They are desperate to find Nirla Sharma. She was last seen Sunday night at home on Lawrence Street in Queensborough, but the next morning she was gone and she did not show up for work. She left behind her work cell phone, her personal cell, her debit, her credit cards as well. A family member said the front door chime sounded around 4 a.m. on Monday, which led police to think that's when she's left. Her daughter says family thought her mom had taken the dogs out that morning, but the pets were still inside. Police have deemed her disappearance high risk because it's just not like her to vanish like this. Her family has been busy putting out missing posters, looking for her, trying to find any clues whatsoever. Police are now looking for any surveillance footage from the area. Sharma's family hopes she hears and sees this.
That we just want her to come home, or if she could just call us and let us know that she's safe and that we love her. And we just want to hear from her and make sure that she's safe and sound, because this isn't like her at all. And for everyone else watching, if you could just keep resharing everything that we've posted and everything that you guys have posted and that the police
Take another look. Nirla Sharma is 44 years old, South Asian, about 5'3". She has a slim build, short black hair and brown eyes. She was last seen in pink pajamas and a pink t-shirt, but she might also be in a black jacket with a hood and Nike orange shoes. She has tattoos on her left arm, right wrist, tailbone, and her left ankle. Anyone who sees or has seen Nirla Sharma or knows where she is asked to contact New Westminster Police, and you can read more about her case on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Anita, Mike?
Dan Burrett live for us tonight. Thanks, Dan.
Police are trying to identify a man accused of breaking into a float plane terminal, stealing a plane, and trying to take off from Vancouver Harbor on Friday. This surveillance video has now been released of the suspect. Police say he broke into the Vancouver Harbor Flight Center and tried to take off in a Sea Air plane, but the aircraft never left the water. He ended up crashing into several other Harbor Air float planes at the dock. Suspect is described as in his 40s, 5'10", with an average build, short brown hair with a slightly receding hairline, and a pronounced brow ridge. Anyone with information is asked to call detectives at VPD or Crime Stoppers.
Well, Surrey Council is getting tired of waiting for the province to ban plastic bags, so the city is moving quickly to do it on its own.
Here's Jesse Johnston with more on why Surrey is taking the step and whether it'll hold up in court.
So basically just make a little ball.
Who needs plastic dishes?
Then we take our machine down, press it.
When your soup bowls
you can see the rim starting to form.
Are as tasty as the soup itself.
It's like an artisan product. It's always going to look a bit unique.
The entrepreneurs behind the food truck company Eat the Dishes say it's about time cities follow their lead and cut out single-use plastics.
Think of all of Canada, think of the whole world. That's tons of plastic and single-use items that are still sitting there in our landfills. So it's really high time that we make some changes to our food systems.
It is really important that the city of Surrey be a leader of this in the world. And
at Surrey City Hall, they must have got the message. council plans to phase out single-use plastics starting in January with a ban on plastic shopping bags, even though the BC government is expected to announce its own plastic waste rules in weeks.
I've actually been in touch with the provincial government, and yes, they are looking at it. But if any indication of provincial governments acting on it, they do not act quickly on this particular thing.
So the city will push ahead with its bag ban, well aware that a similar bylaw in Victoria was just struck down by the courts because the province didn't sign off.
My advice is to, if you pass the bylaw, to send it in for my review in the interim until we deal with the broader issue of their authority.
The federal government also wants to ban single-use plastics, which means there could soon be 3 separate sets of rules from 3 different levels of government. Overkill? Maybe, but council says it's worth it.
I firmly believe that Surrey, by initiating this bylaw, has nudged the province in a sense that there was a feeling, particularly regionally, that the province wasn't moving quick enough.
It's really creamy, and who doesn't love potatoes?
Back in the kitchen.
It's one of our crowd favorites.
It doesn't matter which level of government takes action, as long as it leads to less plastic waste. Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Surrey.
Well, this year's Pink Shirt Day to raise awareness about bullying was a little more emotional for Daryl Crimini. His grandson Carson died last summer at a Langley skate park from an overdose. Carson's death was filmed and mocked by older teenagers. Daryl recently saw those videos for the first time.
The lack of caring was shocking. These were kids older. They were 17 to 20. Mm-hmm. Carson just turned 14 a couple weeks earlier. So he was an easy target. And I think they took advantage of that.
They essentially used him for entertainment.
I think they killed him for entertainment.
To mark the day, Daryl made and gave away dozens of shirts printed with the words, "Play and be kind for Carson." Family and friends paid tribute to Carson last week with a memorial at the Langley Sportsplex. Nobody has been criminally charged in his death. You can watch more of Daryl's interview with the Early Edition on CBC Vancouver's Facebook and YouTube pages.
A BC commercial fisherman has been charged after video surfaced of him throwing an explosive toward a group of sea lions in the Strait of Georgia last year.
For the video's sake.
The device is known as a bear banger. It's meant to make a loud bang to scare off bears and other land animals in the wild. Alan Marsden previously told CBC News he didn't want to hurt the sea lions. He wanted them to just move. He said they'd been causing problems for the fishing industry. He's now facing 3 counts under the Fisheries and Explosives Act.
An independent police force in Surrey could be further away than Mayor Doug McCallum wants, at least according to Wally Opal. Surrey Mayor Doug McCallum wants an independent police force to replace the RCMP in the city by spring of 2021. The former Attorney General has been tasked with helping the city transition to a municipal police force. Today at a Surrey Board of Trade event, he says the 2021 deadline might be unrealistic. Issues of appointing a police board and chief, recruiting and training officers, those are big hurdles.
The province has to take the legislative lead here, and the province has other things on their mandate as well. So anything could happen. And
another big concern, police training in BC is at capacity, and it's unknown how many RCMP officers may decide to actually switch to the new force. Opal says there are benefits that both the RCMP or a municipal police department bring, but it could be 2 years before they're ready. Surrey is currently the largest city in Canada without its own force. Well, spring break is almost here, and while the kids get 2 weeks off, for parents it can be a logistical nightmare.
Take vacation time or pay for potentially costly childcare. Either way, it can get expensive.
So for this latest entry in our Treading Water series, our Deborah Goebel is looking at some more affordable options.
Most kids aren't feeling a whole lot of stress about the upcoming spring break. 2 weeks off school? No problem.
A lot of days just playing. I like playing hide and go seek. Having fun.
Oh, to be a kid.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Bacon.
Bacon who?
Bacon a cake for your birthday.
But spring break is no joke for a lot of working parents.
I wouldn't say dread, but juggling and rearranging and operational maneuvering.
Christine Pilkington runs a website called VancouverMom.ca. With 3 kids herself, she's no stranger to the working mom's juggle.
Now that we've moved into 2 weeks of spring break, it does mean that parents have to shoulder double the burden when it comes to caring for their kids during the March month.
When the March break went from 1 week to 2, school districts were able to save a lot of money, $100,000 a day in Vancouver alone. But there is a catch.
Somebody has to watch those children.
Monday, Tuesday, they're going to Nana's house in Victoria. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with my mom in Abbotsford.
Relatives are always a good option.
I'm the grandma, and grandma does a lot of babysitting.
And the cost is right.
None of us are getting paid. We do it out of the goodness and the love in our hearts.
But not everybody has access to an available grandparent. That's where a little creativity can come in handy.
Some days, so I will gonna take a few days off, and so I can take care of her daughters. And when I going to work, and she will gonna take care of my daughter too.
If a kid swap doesn't work, there are neighborhood teenagers to hire, or maybe even pay someone's nanny to look after your kids too.
Maybe register the kids in a camp.
And there are a whole lot of them out there, from day camps at Kids Club or the Y to specialty camps.
I like going to spring break camps.
There's pedal heads for young cyclists, Arts Umbrella for the creative types, sports camps, space camps, music camps, ecology camps. If your child has an interest, there's probably a camp out there, from the expensive to the downright reasonable.
A lot of our cities, for example, they have community centers that offer camps, and you can usually get those for a full day, at least equivalent to what you'd get for a school day, for around $80 for the entire week.
March 13th is the last day for most schools. Pilkington's best advice to working parents?
Do some research.
And a little organization goes a long way. Maybe think of it as a rehearsal for summer. Deborah Goebel, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, it was pretty sunny out today. It was nice.
It was weird. It was sunny for a bit.
Rainy for
drizzly,
a bit,
yeah.
but we had the sunshine. And apparently it's getting worse.
Well, yeah, worse, exactly. We're going to be dealing with more showers. But yeah, today was one of those days I do want to mention. I have that little icon that shows the sun, the cloud, and the rain. I'm pretty sure all of that was had here in Vancouver over the course of probably 3 hours. But yeah, we've been dealing with this weather that's very unsettled all across BC. And if you look at the satellite imagery right now, you can tell just how much of our province is being impacted by this. In terms of closer to home here, if I zoom in a little bit, you're going to notice that showers are very close to us, but not quite here yet. So southern portions of Vancouver Island getting into that, and we will be dealing with that over the next couple of hours. But right now, it really is just a very simple matter of some clouds. But the thing is, our temperatures as a result of all this cloud have actually been really quite mild. We're looking at 8 degrees right now. This is 6 p.m. outside, and our daytime high that we got up to in Vancouver today was only 9 degrees. So we haven't really budged too much. And White Rock, the warmest spot in BC, not the country, at 12 degrees earlier on this afternoon. But what do we have in store now for the next little while? Well, yeah, showers is going to be the dominant weather story for the next little bit. They're going to be starting in the next few hours, and we're going to be dealing with that throughout the overnight, lasting through tomorrow morning. But by the afternoon tomorrow, we're going to get a little break from that. The temperatures are going to be downright seasonal, looking at about 9 degrees or so. I'm going to have all of those forecast details when I come back.
All right, Brett, thanks. Talk to you in a bit.
And of course, we always like to remind you, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs.
And CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
An anti-pipeline protest blocks a highway on Vancouver Island. A meeting between Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and the provincial and federal governments is suddenly called off. Those stories next.
Well, thanks for being with us online tonight. We're commercial free during our live stream during the TV commercial break.
Overnight, red graffiti appeared on 3 Winnipeg buildings and a monument to fallen police officers. Spray-painted slogans were critical of Canada and of police.
As the CBC's Aidan Gary explains, it comes soon after a rally in support of the Wet'suwet'en.
Bright red graffiti greeted Winnipeggers this morning at RCMP headquarters on a monument dedicated to officers who died in the line of duty. And at a political office across town, messages of criticism like, "You fail us," and "Do better." Over at the Human Rights Museum, more angry messages toward police.
Shock's kind of first, anger sets in afterwards. We understand a message, or if you want to send a message, but I'm not sure why you would want to target a monument that honors those that gave their lives for the people in this province.
Graffiti at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights asked, "Is this the future you want?" CEO John Young said his first reaction was anger, and then reflection.
I don't condone graffiti, but I think we also we need to recognize that this is an effort to make an expression. And so our mandate is to cultivate dialogue and reflection, which we will pursue.
The Liberal MP Dan Vandal, whose office was targeted last week by protests, said he'd rather see a conversation.
It's disappointing when that happens, because the way out of this issue is through dialogue, not vandalizing something or violence. We need to talk to one another, and we need to set the right stage and the right table for that.
Winnipeg police say they are investigating the incidents and believe they are connected. The graffiti comes days after a demonstration was held outside RCMP headquarters in support of Wet'suwet'en. Those demonstrations were peaceful and without damage to any property. While today's acts of vandalism appear to share a similar sentiment, police say it is too early to conclude who is responsible. That's something Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Arlen Dumas supports. But he also called the vandalism unacceptable and asked for an end to racism directed at Indigenous people as demonstrations continue. Aidan Geary, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Demonstrations there. Another demonstration in BC today, this one on the Pat Bay Highway on Vancouver Island.
Blocking access to the ferries to the airport.
That's a major route, so we'll have more on that in a second. And those talks that were planned between the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and both levels of government that were supposed to happen tomorrow suddenly called off. So we'll have more on that. Just a couple of seconds. Stay right here.
Talks between Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and the provincial and federal governments have suddenly been called off. The chiefs who oppose the Coastal GasLink pipeline in northern BC say the governments have abruptly declined to meet, even though earlier today the BC Premier's office said they were waiting to hear from the chiefs about meeting with Ministers Carolyn Bennett and Scott Fraser. The office now says it's unfortunate they weren't able to come to an agreement at this time, but are still interested in meeting if the chief encourages their supporters to remove blockades. The chiefs say their willingness and invitation to meet with BC and Canada remains open, but they also say they cannot speak on behalf of other nations.
And across the country, protesters insist they are acting in support of Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, but some of those chiefs actually support the pipeline project, as do many people who live on that territory.
So we've traveled to ground zero of this national controversy. Chris O'Neill Yates spent the day in Wet'suwet'en, the largest of the First Nations on that Wet'suwet'en land.
We have 700 people that live on reserve.
The deep rift over the Coastal GasLink pipeline hits close to home for Lucy Gagnon, Executive Director of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation. Her band voted for the pipeline, but her husband is a hereditary chief.
My husband is anti-pipeline, and I work for a community as the Executive Director who have signed on, and they've signed an agreement with Coastal GasLink. And so we've agreed in my house that we just don't talk about it because I don't want it to affect our relationship.
That seems to be the case for the wider community.
We can't consume all our time talking about it. There's enough people out there talking about it.
What kind of pipe is this? Black pipe, right?
At this technical college, students are training for pipe fitting jobs.
This course gives people the foot in the door to, go on to do stuff like that, and it can bring them a long ways.
But even here, talk of the pipeline is avoided.
There's lots of drama going on, and I don't want to upset anybody by saying something wrong.
Yeah. Skaski site Denise Medik.
Students here are learning the Wet'suwet'en language, which has almost disappeared. Despite the national controversy, they find getting on with normal life is the best way to cope.
I'm not for, nor am I against. We need our rights as Indigenous people.
People get nasty on both sides, and that shouldn't be, that's not us. And that's what this has created, and it's sad.
Chief Victor Jim says these divisions will take time to heal, but only the Wet'suwet'en themselves can do that.
We're working for the same people. And that's what we have to keep in the back of our minds.
Even if right now the path ahead seems far from clear. Chris O'Neill-Yates, CBC News, on Wet'suwet'en First Nation, BC.
And while tensions there remain high on Vancouver Island, Highway 17 is open once again after demonstrators blocked the roadway for several hours this afternoon.
You're in it. You're living in it. You're existing in it. And yet you still try to exclude us from being a part of what is called Canada.
About 80 people stopped traffic on the Pat Bay Highway at the intersection of Mount Newton Cross Road in central Saanich. Earlier today, government lawyers obtained a court injunction to stop blockades on that highway. The traffic was blocked in all directions, including motorists heading to and from the Swartz Bay Ferry Terminal and Victoria.
And Indigenous youth stepped up their criticism of the provincial and federal governments today as they protest on the legislature steps in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs.
As Indigenous youth, we declare that reconciliation is dead and that we set the terms for Canada's relationship with us on our lands, on our traditional territories, and for our future.
They're calling on the government to pull pipeline permits, end RCMP patrols of Indigenous land, and to meet with Indigenous leaders. They say they'll stay on the BC legislature steps until their demands are met.
Vancouver police have had their hands full this month dealing with protests across the city, and they are saying their approach to each one is never the same. Yesterday, officers arrested 6 people for violating a court injunction and blocking a key entrance to the Port of Vancouver. Those protesters were at the port entrance for more than 24 hours before police moved in. They say officers do not move in and make arrests until commanders determine it's necessary.
So we do have to respond accordingly, and as we just stated, we do treat each protest as an individual protest and see where it's going to go from there.
He says in situations like this, officers remind protesters they are violating an injunction and give them time to relocate. And most of all, police officers maintain neutrality at protests no matter the goal of the demonstration.
One of the landmark changes to the region after the 2010 Olympics, a smooth and quick sea-to-sky connecting Vancouver and Whistler. But a smooth road has brought some bumps to the regions. That's next.
Before the games, Vancouver vowed to try to curb resales, knowing it wasn't illegal, by warning people about being ripped off, sued a couple of resale companies, and set up their own site to allow fans to scalp their tickets. But Vancouver now admits it's like the wild, wild west out there, with scalpers telling us they'll be leaving Vancouver with thousands, if not millions of dollars in profit.
Certainly we're seeing prices now that are many multiples of what the face value of the tickets would be, and I expect if Canada and and the U.S. in particular win in the semifinals today, I think we'll probably see all-time high.
One of Vannock's pre-game's warnings about scalpers was the chance of fake tickets, a problem police haven't really seen materialize. But Alan Rubenstein got burned when he tried to go to today's noon game.
But when I went to the stadium, they scanned the ticket and said stop. So the ticket was no good. And unlike a Super Bowl, they give you an area to sit if you have a bogus ticket. But here they just said goodbye.
He was able to get a refund by returning to the scalper he bought the ticket from, and the scalper claimed he too was taken by another man.
Well, he just specifically said he bought his tickets from somebody who was British, and that he kind of had a feeling, because the price was too good, that maybe the ticket was compromised.
Soldiers today! Get in! There we are, back!
And where else in the world can you be a policeman and play road hockey and not get fired?
Yeah! Woo! Ready? Woo! Right here. Come on in. Let's go! Cleric, you're going down! A-O, Canada, go! A-O, Canada, go!
They were told they gotta be here, and they are. Even on a rare rainy day during the games. 100,000 people on average are hitting Robson Square each day.
It's hard to single out just where are our tourists versus who are the residents, but without question we're seeing a big influx of U.S. residents.
It's very fun. It's great to see people from all over the world.
And right now, that's big for retailers and restaurants at the center of this Olympic moment. But what about later?
And we're looking at to what degree there's a crest of interest or a crest of participation that exceeds where we've seen previous years.
They're surveying 5,000 visitors to find out what they spent and what they thought, and following up with many of them back home to see if they'd come again. The soggy ones we met said yes, and are telling their friends back home.
Do it again. Come with us next time we come next month.
We've been trying to make them as jealous as we could.
It's fabulous. Yeah, everybody's really friendly. Yeah, we've had a good time.
Yeah, had a great holiday.
And to capitalize on that, you can expect a lot more of this.
You gotta be here.
You gotta be here. You gotta be here.
Ads paid for by governments and tourism boards promoting our province and city.
But we need to be there within the next 6 to 8 months in a very profound and impactful way, asking for that business so that people will then go to that next step.
So people who've only seen Vancouver from their TV sets might come visit. Lisa Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
I'm not great with heights.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
So we would expect them to stay at home until they are well. We will probably give them some advice on how long to stay at home.
It may well be a matter of when, not if, in dealing with a widespread outbreak of coronavirus here in BC. And while health officials insist people shouldn't worry about catching it, tonight they are talking about a pandemic response plan. Part of that plan is to ask you to stay home if you catch COVID-19, just like if you had the flu.
No, we just wanted to come home.
The family of a missing woman in New Westminster is pleading for information to help find her. 44-year-old Nirla Sharma is considered a high-risk missing person because of the nature of her disappearance.
A lot of people would like to eat in a zero waste way, but there is not a lot of options.
Surrey says the province isn't moving quickly enough, so the city is planning on bringing in its own ban on plastic bags. More than 76 million single-use plastic items from Surrey wind up in landfills every year, about a third of which are plastic bags.
In the 10 years since it was upgraded for the Olympics, the Sea to Sky Highway has become a coastal landmark, but it was a bumpy road getting there.
A highway expansion was met with large protests, as you may recall, and as the CBC's John Hernandez reports, demonstrators have moved on, but there are new problems for communities right along the corridor.
Passing lanes, concrete barriers, and breathtaking views. It's easy to forget this used to be one of the deadliest highways in BC.
So far this year, 13 people have died in accidents on this treacherous road.
The Sea to Sky Highway, for years plagued by crashes and rock slides, the recipient of a $600 million Olympic makeover.
So there was a lot of unsafe passing, head-on collisions, all kinds of tragedies that were taking place there. So we had to fix that. And the Olympics just gave us a reason to accelerate what needed to be done anyhow.
Upgrades that were met with stark opposition.
Long live Eagle Ridge Bluffs! Down with tyranny!
The proposed route cut through Eagle Ridge Bluffs, a sensitive West Vancouver wetland. Residents and environmental activists occupied construction sites. Many were arrested, some even jailed.
This is the backyard, not just of West Vancouverites, but the whole Lower Mainland.
Pamela Goldsmith-Jones was elected mayor after she spoke out against the project. She says the protests helped save a swath of wetland near White Lake. The municipality has since adopted stricter bylaws for new developments.
Now, through processes that we put in place, the streams come first, the trees come first, and development we will try to put on small of a footprint as possible.
The project was completed in 2009, and since then, the rate of serious crashes has dropped by about 20%, but the total number of drivers has swelled. There's more than 16,000 commuters between Whistler and West Vancouver each day.
But now we see that highway with the tourism traffic and commuters on busy weekends, it starts to fail. Like we get bumper-to-bumper traffic in a few spots where it is still narrow.
Squamish Mayor Karen Elliott says it's made her community a more desirable place to live, even for people who work in Metro Vancouver.
It's brought some big city problems for our community that we're grappling with. So the cost of housing, it went up very quickly. Our vacancy rate has been near zero since 2015.
The road, more traveled, a legacy that, just like these rolling hills, has ups and downs. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
6:36. There's a live shot of Toronto tonight from a camera at Billy Bishop Airport. Well, they're gearing up for a big winter storm in southern Ontario and Toronto tonight. A calmer forecast here in the Lower Mainland. Brett has details east and west next.
The weather update is brought to you by The Body Shop that always takes you back to your happy place. BC's favorite, Craftsman Collision, Air Miles, and Bigger Smiles.
Brett is here. A big snowstorm. Yeah. For Toronto.
Yeah, not for us. Don't.
I got confused there.
It's one of those times where there was a brief little bit of panic, I think, for everyone
Not trying to
listening
spread
there.
panic, yeah.
No, but yeah, this is actually a pretty significant storm that's going on for the east, and not just for Toronto, but our capital, Ottawa, potentially getting upwards of 40 centimeters of snow through tomorrow, and then it's going to be Atlantic Canada's turn. We have absolutely nothing like that here. It's just going to be a few showers. It'll be no real issue, but I do want to show you a live look at the radar across much of southern Ontario right now, and just to kind of give you a scope of what's happening, we are approaching 10 o'clock over there local time, and the snow is really just starting to be picking up in and around Toronto and areas along the 401. Of course, that's the major highway that essentially connects Windsor all the way over to Montreal. And what you're noticing here in pink, this is extended periods of freezing rain as well for places like Kingston. And you know, if you've ever been to the area, driving is already a pretty difficult thing. There's just so many people commuting on these roads. Tomorrow is not going to be an easy day for them at all. And as I mentioned, yeah, Ottawa potentially getting 40 centimeters of snow by tomorrow. But back over here, if we are talking about us, we certainly have nowhere close to that amount of snow, and we will barely be seeing any real significant rainfall. January, I always go back to this, was such a rainy month that when we talk about maybe getting 5 millimeters of rain here in the lower mainland, it really does just pale in comparison. But to walk you through the timing of this, over the next couple of hours, we're going to see these showers make their way across much of the lower mainland, and this has the potential to be bringing some mixing, if not some snow, to our very highest elevations. Freezing levels, say, around 1,200 meters or so throughout the day tomorrow. Really, just expect it to be showery off and on. This is not going to be a sort of persistent rain by any means. And of course, the farther south you are in the region, say toward White Rock or Delta, really the likelihood is that you're probably not going to be dealing with too much shower activity at all. And then by this time tomorrow night, it's going to be clearing out fairly quickly at that point. Now, this is going to be a story for all of BC. We're looking at much of southern portions of Vancouver Island getting into that heavier rain tonight as well. Inland, though, if we go into the Okanagan and the Kootenays, it's going to be quite dry and sunny by contrast. And farther to the north as well, conditions there a little bit off and on, meaning that we could be dealing with some snow for places like Terrace and Smithers. But temperatures down here for the next little while still going to be at seasonal, if not slightly above. Would not be surprised to see places like Abbotsford getting up to about 11 degrees or so by the end of the week. And in terms of a long-range forecast, just a quick sneak peek, we're going to be dealing with a bit of a system coming through Friday into Saturday, but overall that means that Saturday is probably not looking too bad at all. Here's a look at our 5-day forecast. You're going to probably notice something on here that it looks like showers are in the icon for pretty well every single day. That's just to let you know there is a chance for showers to go through. It is not going to be raining non-stop, and if nothing else, temperatures at least are going to be fairly close to where they should be, and we're going to be going into March very soon. So kind of classic spring-looking forecast, I do think.
Nothing like what they're seeing back east.
No, absolutely not.
Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
President Trump trying to reassure Americans about the coronavirus situation, saying the U.S. is ready, but his efforts to calm waters may be entirely political. That's next.
Vanessa Grading, and I'm the president and CEO of the BC Women's Health Foundation. And we're a foundation that supports ensuring women have equitable access to quality health care across the province. I am being recognized as an influential woman in business by BIV. It provides us with an opportunity to talk about why having women in positions of leadership is important. A partnership like CBC Vancouver with BIV is important. I think that any time that we feature folks that are making up the quilt work of our particular city, it does everybody a favor.
Coronavirus is now on every continent except Antarctica. New hotspots include Iran, Italy, and South Korea, where thousands have fallen ill. Governments across the globe are now facing the same question. Are we prepared? Catherine Cullen has more on Canada's plan.
We're still in containment phase, but we have to start preparing.
The message from health officials is a mix of reassurance and caution.
We're also starting to prepare for a possible pandemic. So we can't do this with our eyes closed and not recognize what might happen weeks and months from now.
Travelers who visited Hubei province in China still get extra screening. Others in airports are asked to speak up if they have any symptoms. But health officials say simply shuttering Canada to anyone isn't a solution.
It's not about closing the borders. It's certainly from a public health perspective, closing the borders has never proven to be effective in terms of stopping the spread or the introduction of disease into any country.
Officials say the healthcare system is preparing too, including lessons learned from past outbreaks.
Right now, we're doing 30 or 40 tests a day. Our lab can do up to 1,000. But we don't want to rest on that. What happens if we have to go to 2,000 or 3,000? How are we going to prepare for that? So you got to do that preparation now.
Even the armed forces, which has helped with repatriation flights and quarantines, says it's ready to do more.
We are currently refreshing contingency plans for a larger domestic response.
I think it's always wise to be prepared from a community and a country level.
The health minister said today Canadians can play a role as well by washing their hands, staying home if they're ill, and being ready the same way they would for a major snowstorm or power disruption.
There's no magic to this. It's really about, first of all, making sure that you do have enough supplies. If someone in your family becomes ill, if you yourself become ill, that you have what you need to survive, for a week or so without going out.
The goal is to reassure. Officials insist Canadians' risk of getting COVID-19 is low and that they are ready to respond if that changes. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Whatever impact the virus ends up having in Canada, it'll be hospitals and healthcare workers on the front line. Vicadopia gives us a sense of how ready they are.
So this is one of our supply rooms here, just to give you a sense.
At Humber River Hospital, the shelves are packed with equipment in case of an outbreak.
Ventilators, which are ready to go. We've got 3 of them in here. We have another one in one of the other rooms. We have our PAPR hood set up. It's like a whole helmet that's attached to a HEPA filter around their back if we needed them.
Humber River was designed with isolation rooms, as are most new hospitals in Canada. Entire wings can be quarantined. Still, it doesn't take much to overwhelm any hospital and its existing patients.
If we had any increase in surge, we would have to put those people either in unusual places, or we would have to try to stop as many elective procedures as we possibly could.
Screening is now focusing on a widening circle of countries.
We need to shift our thinking into this is going to become a problem within Canada within a matter of weeks to months, and so we need to get on that. We can't just keep pretending we're going to screen everybody out at the airports.
Family practices aren't as well stocked as hospitals, and there's not much this doctor says she can do.
I don't know, check the mail for more gloves, hopefully, but we don't have those, or more hand sanitizer.
She hasn't seen the coronavirus, but it's still keeping her busy.
Questions around how likely a person is to get it, and is it soon coming to Canada, and will their families be affected, and how many hospitalizations, and is it safe to go to an emergency room, and is it safe to travel?
So far, only Ontario and BC have seen confirmed cases. Other provinces are also preparing themselves. But just how big the disruption could be is still unknown in an outbreak that's only getting worse. Vicadopia, CBC News, Toronto.
And U.S. President Donald Trump is downplaying the dangers of COVID-19. 15 people have contracted the virus in the U.S. so far. As Paul Hunter reports, Trump is keen to show his administration is in control.
Said to have been privately frustrated by U.S. efforts to stop the spread of the virus, Donald Trump publicly tonight played down its impact on America so far.
Because of all we've done, the risk to the American people remains very low.
Underlining the still tiny number of people infected in this country, Trump nonetheless signaled he's willing to go beyond what he'd expected in response to it.
We were asking for $2.5 billion, and we think that's a lot, but the Democrats and I guess Senator Schumer wants us to have much more than that. And normally in life I'd say, we'll take it. We'll take it.
This after a tweet earlier in which Trump suggested news reports are doing everything possible to make the coronavirus look as bad as possible, including panicking markets. Meanwhile, critics had slammed Trump for having made deep budget cuts during his time in office to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. Said Democrats earlier on Trump's response broadly to the growing worldwide threat.
I don't think the president knows what he's talking about, once again.
Tonight, Trump put Vice President Mike Pence in charge of coordinating U.S. action on the virus. And as for those cuts Trump's made to the CDC, said Trump he's unworried. Whichever infectious disease experts were let go can always be rehired.
I don't like having thousands of people around when you don't need them. When we need them, we can get them back very quickly.
Trump did note there's a chance this could all get worse here, but nothing's inevitable, he said, adding that wherever this does go, the U.S. is, as Trump put it tonight, very, very ready. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
3 days of deadly violence in India's capital have left at least 24 dead and nearly 200 people injured. Today was the first day of relative calm after clashes between hardline Hindu mobs and protesters in New Delhi. It's the latest unrest over a controversial new law that's triggered demonstrations across the nation for months. Critics say the changes made to the citizenship process is biased against Muslims. Some witnesses say pro-Hindu mobs targeted homes of Muslims and destroyed properties. In a tweet today, India's Prime Minister appealed for everyone to maintain peace.
Coming up, how one Canadian company is making self-driving technology a reality on our roads.
Yeah, it's really relevant here in Metro Vancouver.
I'm calling from CBC Vancouver News.
There are so many stories in this city to tell and to explore.
Are you available for an interview?
Our listeners deserve an explanation.
That's just anecdotal.
It's really the perfect place to live.
The fact that people come from all over and want to make a home here, that says a lot about the city. Tomorrow on the Early Edition, anti-hate groups say there's been an increase in hates and threats of violence directed at Indigenous people since the blockades to support the Wet'suwet'en were erected. Our Reconcile This columnist Angela Sterrett will bring us that story.
All right, Mike, what do you think? Could Vancouver manage to be a driverless city?
I don't know, we have a tough time even with real drivers.
This is true. Well, Toronto is testing out the technology in some of its city fleet.
Yeah, 10 vehicles are kitted out with a machine that turns most cars into semi-autonomous vehicles with just a small computer and some hardware. Yeva looks. Went along for a ride.
This is a 2017 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van 2500 in black. It's a 7-speed automatic transmission with a 161 horsepower diesel engine. It's known as the workhorse of commercial vehicles, and today it's going to drive itself.
So all I do is just hit a button that's sitting on top of the wheel controller and take my foot off the gas and brake and let it go. You got the brake controller.
Xmatic CEO and founder Nima Ashtari came up with Lane Cruise, a kit that turns any car made in the last 20 years into a semi-automated vehicle.
I can also control how fast I want the car to go with just these 2 buttons on the steering wheel. It also slows down further. So I've slowed down, people are upset. Well, people are very aggressive, and the system is very conservative.
So right now, if you did grab the steering wheel and tried to turn the car, the whole thing would shut down?
Yeah, so if I just, there it is, and it's off. And so it's back to being a regular car.
So that felt weird. That was strange when you put it into that mode and it started to sense everything around it.
Xmatic started in 2015 and has some high-profile investors.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have some fun with this.
I know. Thanks.
Since then, the company has gathered 1 million kilometers of data, and it's accumulating 5,000 to 10,000 more a month. All of it is filtered in real time to a brain center inside this home in North York.
A lot of people have misconceptions around what startups do or what they should look like. Maybe the neighboring house is not your traditional family of 2 with 2 kids and 2 parents. Maybe it's a startup.
The home base has 12 people updating the existing software, offering real-time support to drivers, and working on the next generation of Lane Cruise. Xmatic is one of the few companies in the world offering an aftermarket kit, but it's not for your average driver. It can't change lanes and works best for professional driving long hours on the highway.
At the job site, when I arrive, I'm going to be this much better at my job because I wasn't doing this super boring put me to sleep job. And that's really what automation is all about. It's about replacing the most mundane parts of our lives.
Yeva Lutz, CBC News, Toronto.
First of all, I can't believe Yeva's sitting in there all natural, not feeling nervous at all.
You're pretty comfortable, yeah. I mean, so it's not truly, it's not driverless, obviously.
No, you have to have someone in the driver's seat.
Yes. They don't have the infrastructure quite set up to deal with that in the true sense, but it's coming. It'll happen eventually.
Scary, scary stuff.
That's it for us tonight. You can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC.
Dan's here at 11. Have a good night.